Once again, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Courtney. I'm one of the co-hosts tonight, as well as Allie, who will take away our introductions for tonight.
Okay. I'm Allie with Allegany County Library System. I have to pull up my notes here because there's a few things to go over. Again, we do want to thank you for being here and for joining us and just for being interested in having these kind of important but sometimes uncomfortable conversations. I don't think it will be a problem, but please just remember to be respectful and open-minded and choose civility while you're here during these discussions. If you can, you may have noticed whenever you entered that you were muted. We ask that you please just stay muted unless you are talking, just so there's not any type of interference. If you would like to talk, please just ask in chat or use the raised hand button. I believe that is under the participants little sidebar there. If you don't have to have your video on to discuss. If you would feel more comfortable not having your video on, that's fine. Just as long as we have audio and we can hear you. Let's see. It's not normally a problem to have people talking over themselves, but it's always nice to just ask just in case. You may have noticed too that you may have gotten a warning that this is being recorded. We do post these videos on YouTube, usually within a few days, hopefully within 24 hours, but that's just in case anyone misses it or wants to revisit it. We do tend to have a lot of students who do come back and look at the recordings, so we hope that the recordings will help engage and prompt others to also have these important discussions as well. We also encourage you to type in the chat if you do not feel comfortable speaking, and we will try to highlight some of those messages as well. If there are any real articles related to what we were talking about, please feel free to share any of those links in the chat as well. And then there are just a few announcements before we really get into it. The Book Center in downtown Cumberland is holding a Just Mercy book discussion on April 14th at 6 p.m. We encourage anyone who may miss our discussions or maybe just wants to discuss further, or if you are more comfortable in an unrecorded setting, that you can attend that one in addition to or instead of, whatever ends up working for you. There is also an event called Why It Matters, Reckoning with Race and Allyship, and it is in conversation with Kimberly Jones and Gilly Siegel, and it is on March 16th from 7 p.m. to 8:30, and they are discussing their best-selling book, I'm Not Dying With You Tonight, which was inspired by the death of Freddie Gray. And I will put a link for that in the chat here in a second. And then there is also a racial justice essay contest, which I am going to give the floor to Sarah Welsh, and she will tell you a little bit more about that.
Hi, everybody. I am Sarah Welsh. I am the Equity and Student Outcomes Coordinator for Allegany County Public Schools, and I'm working in collaboration with the NAACP and the Equal Justice Initiative, which is a national organization, as well as our localized version of that, the ACL-TRC, to host the Equal Justice Initiative's essay contest this year. This is taking the place of, in the previous years, there's been an annual NAACP branch 7007 essay contest that's generally been held throughout between November and February of each year. This one, we're handing it over to EJI this year, though we're helping to facilitate that because in part they're focusing on a pretty broad area of subjects. There's an option for doing some research on local history, as well as essentially any topic that is covered in this book. So the really exciting part is that they have agreed to extend the original essay deadline to April 30th. So if you had looked into that before, and it was set for the end of February, in light of this discussion happening, and there are, I know, several teachers who have gotten some students involved, and there may even be here some this evening. And I know there are some who are joining us within the next couple of sessions because they were just getting the books this week. We're so excited to have you submit essays for the scholarship/essay contest. It's open to all high school students in Allegany County Public Schools, and there are upwards of $5,000 in prize money, scholarship money that will be awarded, and that ceremony will happen on that will coincide with the Juneteenth celebration this year. And it'll be a really exciting time. So I'm happy to be involved in this and to be able to partner in this way. So I'll put my email also in the chat. So if you have additional questions about that, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Sarah. And then there is also an event happening with ACM, and I'm going to give the floor to Ashley to talk about that event.
Allie. Hi everybody, I'm Ashley Komeyer, and I am a student at ACM in the Human Service Program. And this is just a small introduction about our capstone project this year. And we want to know if you would be interested in joining the Human Service students for the event. And the title of the event is Breaking Free, Life Behind and Beyond Bars, a community call for criminal justice reform. This ceremony will include the presentation from Anthony Ray Hinton himself. There will be questions afterwards for him to answer, a little bit of time for that. And also Congressman Trone will be available there at the event. And we are asking you to save the date, and that is for April 19th at 6 p.m. And it is a virtual event. It is free for everybody to join. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Most of the stuff is also linked, I believe, on the Just Mercy landing page over on our website as well. And I do just want to quickly thank our partners, True Civility and the NAACP and Leadership Allegany, for helping us put this together, host it, and spread the word. So thank you. And with that, we can start the discussion. And I think the first thing is just, general thoughts of the book. How did it make us feel, and what were we expecting, and just, the first thoughts into the first 4 chapters that we ended up reading.
It's very scary knowing that this man did 30 years in prison, and an innocent man, and his hope, and just everything that you read through the book. It's just amazing that it came out the way he did, on top.
I think a lot of poignant details were given in the prologue. This is not the first time I've read this book. It is very disheartening how Alabama has treated their people. I think the little line that said capital punishment means you have no money. It's capital punishment because you're in poverty. And it is very disheartening to see what people did, how they lied, how they went out and just found somebody and accused them of the crime when they had nothing to do with it, and railroaded people through. And then so many people have died that were completely innocent. I just, what we're seeing today is instead of our society going in a positive direction, I think we're going in a negative direction. And I don't know. We need to have justice for all. Thank you.
Yeah, I know. I don't know what I was expecting really going into this, honestly, myself. And I was not expecting to be incredibly emotional within just the prologue, to the point where I'm like standing at my kitchen counter sobbing my eyes out. I was like, I don't know why. I just didn't think that quickly that it would hit me. There was a lot of things in here. I'm not super, I guess, I'm a little, I guess, ignorant when it comes to more of the justice side of things. I don't get a lot of the jargon and things like that, but I was very encouraged to see that this was very digestible and I was able to understand it. But the things that I just did not know, and that things that I would have thought would have happened hundreds of years ago, and only to find out that some of these things were still happening in like 2010, were just, I just did not believe it. I didn't believe it. I literally had like marked them in the book and was just like, what? How did this go by me? I don't, it's just, it was depressing. And I know we're going to get more into, you know, how we would think that we would feel in those situations, but the overall book, I think, is very easy to understand, and it's, you know, he hits the soul with the stories that he's telling.
Ellie, I have to agree with you on that. I kind of just with the prologue, even when they told the guy that you're not in jeopardy of conviction within the next year, that the client didn't want his daughter or wife there because he was afraid it would be the last time they would see him, which I thought that was like, wow, just that little piece of news was meant the world to him. And I do think that maybe in a way we aren't moving as forward as quickly as we think we should be, and with our justice system.
I think on the other side of it, you know, looking at it from Bryan's point of view, like how he said, you know, looking at it from compassion rather than just, you know, let's quickly punish him because, you know, he's a black man, because he's different colored, and, you know, whatever else and whatnot. You know, that's what the justice system looks at. They look at the minorities, not and about people who are in poverty, and, you know, not because, you know, digging into the real thing, you know, and to see, you know, we don't ever really think about, oh, well, why don't we have compassion for this person or for that person, or what were the legitimate reasons why this happened, you know, even if if it were to be true, what really happened, because we never really know. Well, was she just and this is just stepping outside of the box, you know, was she really just a woman trying to instigate something, or somebody told her to instigate it? You know, nobody really looks into something like that. Instead, because he's a black man and he was around, and somebody knew that, oh, well, they were having an affair or they were friends, let's automatically, hey, he's the guy to blame. That's it. No ifs, ands, or buts. And then it's a small town, especially in small towns, you know, something like that. It's like, oh, well, so and so said this and so said that. So there you have it, you know, and it's sad. Instead of bringing somebody from to me, I think it's more biased, especially being, you know, a small community, for Bryan to step in that way. We need more people like that, or more lawyers, and to step up and say, hey, you know, I don't think somebody from your community should do something like this, because it can be, how do you say, I can't even think of the word, but kind of like, not like it's kind of like fraternization, but not in that terms, because obviously, you know, that's not what's going on. But, you know, a conflict of interest. There you go. It's a conflict of interest. And sometimes somebody who's not within the same community should step in, so that way there's no familiar ties within that, and there's nobody saying, hey, well, you know what, because you're my friend, I'm going to say this and I'm going to say that, like they did, you know, because they knew Myers and what could happen with him. You know, he could easily get out, or that he could get whatever he wanted. But then turns around, hey, you know what? I got to do the right thing. We need to give them the right stuff. You know, that's just my opinion. Just stepping from, you know, not just from the person who's in prison, but the people who are fighting for the people who are in prison.
Yeah, a few months ago, I guess, I don't know everyone, but I know I've watched a bit more Netflix and Amazon Prime because due to COVID. And anyway, I was just, happened to be talking at work, and my fellow coworker gently introduced me to the Innocence Files on Netflix. And it turns out she has like a relative by marriage who's in one of the episodes who was wrongly accused and, put in prison for, I forgot, 15 years, but he finally did get out thanks to the newest, or I guess the DA, the new DA in Philly, well, relatively new. But anyway, I feel really blessed because she saw me reading Just Mercy, and she's been very gentle with me, like in my outrage, she has not been like, yeah, this has been happening for century or decades at least, and how did you not know this, so yeah, it's been, this past 6 months has been an eye-opening. And I think from Just Mercy, from the Netflix episode, from the Innocence Files, I realized how corrupt the DA can be in the justice system, how they're just so quick to find somebody and just to make it a good headline for them in the news. But anyway, from Just Mercy, I realized how the Supreme Court has passed. I never knew that all the law or the rulings that the Supreme Court passed that are so prejudicial against the impoverished. That just blew me away. I mean, the Innocent Files blew me away, but then I just keep getting blown away. I think more people need to know. I mean, I just feel so stupid.
Can I jump in real quick?
Yes, please.
I just want to make 2 points. The first point is that capital punishment is barbarism. I mean, there's just no other word for it. And I know that a lot of us are focusing on the innocent, but there are people on death row that have done hideous things. But the author asks us, do we want to be judged by the worst thing we've ever done? And we've all done some pretty bad things. Maybe not bad things, bad enough to be, in prisons or be on death row. But if that is the face of who we are, the worst thing we've ever done, none of us would be able to live with that. So yes, there are criminals. Yes, there are people that have done hideous things, but there is still humanity in those people. The other point I wanted to make is more kind of a political point, and it's about federalism and states' rights. And I think it is just unconscionable that you have different outcomes in this country depending on whether you were born in Alabama or California or New York, and why we don't have baseline, rights to education, to opportunity, to representation in the criminal justice system that is even across the board. And it is not. It depends where you were born, and God help you if you were born in Alabama. That's all I got to say.
Thank you all for all those great responses. We're going to go ahead and move on to the first question then, and I'll hand it over to Courtney.
All right, let me get my screen up, and Allie is going to post this question in the chat so you guys can take a look at that if maybe you are more of an auditory or not an auditory learner. So Stephen discusses his grandmother's background and what impact that had on his career choices. How did Stevenson's background prepare him for law school? What from your own personal background has influenced your career choices? So our background really plays a huge role in our choices in life. For myself, had a good family support, able to go to college, work in a library system, work in a museum, history, all that great stuff. But if I didn't have access from the family support, I wouldn't be able to do that. Does anyone else want to jump in, maybe their background or Stephen's background?
Vicky, if you want to go ahead.
So my mother was a nurse for 40 plus years, and it really inspired me to join the medical field. It took me a little bit longer to get there. Nursing is my second go around of college. And after obtaining my LPN and seeing how successful she was as an RN, it really encouraged me and to go back to school for my RN and hopefully to continue on with my BSN. So having my mom there and as a role model, even my father working in the school system, I feel very blessed and fortunate to have the parents that I have that had showed me such a great work ethic.
I would be willing to share. I also am a nurse. I started out in pre-med. I wasn't making the grades I knew I needed, so I flipped back to nursing. My grandmother was a nurse. My mother was a nurse. I really didn't become a nurse because of that, but it looks that direction. I was raised in a very loving Christian home. There was never a lot of money. I'm the oldest of 5 children. But I would like to go back to some of the things that the gal said before me, Vicky. The book that's out there that would be excellent to read is Caste by Isabel Wilkerson. And it is mind opening about the fact that we don't, as the white people, we don't understand how the Black race has been subjugated and continues to be. And it just, we need to understand this to see, and a lot of people don't understand. And so I would highly recommend, checking that book out of the library. It is a book that Oprah bought 500 copies and sent to all the governors and people, leaders in big cities. And it is really great because she also did podcasts with Isabel and went over the 8 pillars she discussed in the book. And I am enjoying understanding more. One thing that my father did when we were young in the 60s, when race relations were tough, he would bring Black children to our home and we would play. And you would see they're just like I am. They're just like you. We all bleed red blood. And so there's just a whole lot you have to understand. But I agree with Vicky. I don't even know if I want to step foot in Alabama, because the North and the South, to some of the Southerners, we are still in a civil war. And politics, I know you don't want to hear it, but the last 4 years have been tough for me.
Something I want to add to what, Miss Trina, what you said, we recently in class, we watched a premiere for the Reunited States of America. I don't know if anybody else has seen it, but there was a situation where a woman in Oklahoma, and she was a Black woman, and the nurses refused to give her any care whatsoever because she was Black, and she was going into, sorry, I'm getting emotional about it because I have babies of my own and I'm a nurse, and I would hate to be that kind of, and I'm an OB-GYN nurse, so, you know, but she gave birth preterm delivery to a baby, and the nurses told her, and they were white nurses, and they told her, you know, oh, you're fine, there's nothing wrong with you, and just left her in the room by herself. Her dad dropped her off, and basically just laid there while her baby died, and just sat in the room. So she had this idea of white people that they were not all considerate, they were not all compassionate, you know. And so when she first saw this white family that came to talk to her, you know, at first she wasn't happy, but she said, okay, you know, I'm going to give it a try. And you know, their relationship just, and I mean, in the discussion, you know, they said that till this day they keep up with each other, they're best friends. Now she sees white people in a different way because, and we're not all the same. We're not. You know, for me, you know, I decided to become a nurse. I came from an okay family. I mean, I didn't have the greatest upbringing. My family had a lot of, you know, cardiac, renal issues. My daughter has renal issues. She only has one kidney, you know, just all kinds of crazy stuff. So I said, well, you know, I don't want to go to school to be a doctor. That's too much, but I do want to go to be a nurse. And I recently went through a divorce, and I'm Hispanic, and our judge was a white man. My lawyer is a white man. My husband is white, and his lawyer was Hispanic. Oddly enough, the judge was the same judge who convicted my father for imprisonment. Now, I was 16 at the time, no, 15. I'm sorry, I was 15 at the time, and you know, teenagers, stupid, loud, don't know what the heck they're doing, and you know, he was just calling my dad all kinds of ugly, bad things, and all I could do was stand up and, you know, hey, you know, you don't even know my dad. Don't sit there and, you know, try to say this about him. He made a bad decision, yes, but he's not this bad man you're trying to portray him to be. So, of course, my aunt had to walk me out of the courtroom because of what had happened. Come to find out, everything was falling into favor for my ex-husband. I mean, I got to keep my kids because my ex-husband wasn't going to do it. But everything else, as far as like our house, you know, everything we needed to share was going into his favor. And I was just like, what the heck is going on? Like, I have everything in hand right here that shows how, you know, my husband is not in the right mindset to, you know, have any of this, to get custody of my kids, to even have joint custody of my kids, if anything, supervised visits. It was the same judge who convicted my dad, who happened to be the one to divorce us. So finally, after 2 years, he went ahead with it because I brought it to the attention of my lawyer. My lawyer couldn't do anything even though he was a white man, he couldn't do anything about it because it would ruin his reputation with that judge and with his future clients. And that's the sad thing about it, of being, you know, not just Black, but, you know, being Mexican, being Indian, you know, any other race. That doesn't mean being the same as them. You know, it's terrible. It's a terrible, terrible thing.
Thanks, Martha. I think.
Yeah, so my name is Mala. I'm from Guinea, West Africa. So I'm an LPN. I've been in the nursing field for almost 15 years now, but nothing encouraged me. We took care of my grandmother at home because, as you know, we don't have no nursing home back home. So you take care of your own and all that. So I grew up doing that. Grandmothers, grandfather, aunties, we take care of them till they die. So I always love to take care of people. And of course, I'm not coming from money, no. So one day I want to go home because I always go home. I want to go and help my people. Like my boy will always say, you need to go further so you can help my grandma. Grandma is sick. So that's what I want to do. That's what I'm doing, nursing. I'm an LPN. I work in a nursing facility right now. In Alabama, I've been there. Literally, I'm working with my auntie. This cop just stopped us and tell us to show our papers, not even ID. He want us to show that we are legally here. I've never heard that. I couldn't believe it. I was like, okay, but I thought you cannot really work with your paper around, because if you lose it, what is gonna happen? You know, it's a sad thing to say, but yeah, it's crazy. Sometimes I just want to go home. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you all for sharing those very personal stories and, for sharing those with us here. And I think sometimes I know, as someone who comes from a privileged area, that sometimes we don't think of those things always happening right in front of our eyes necessarily. So it's one thing to read it in a book, and then another thing when you have to be the person that experiences that. And, I'm sorry for the things that have happened, and I hope for a better future.
I want to say something.
And I think we have, if anyone else wants to just quickly add, or we can move on to the next question.
Could I quickly add something?
Sure.
I just want to say that I am originally from Jamaica, and came to this country in my late 20s. Didn't experience racism until I got here. And I'm pro-Black. I love my color, and it's a shame to see what it's a shame to see that it will never be accepted. In my opinion, it's 2021, and nothing. I didn't read the book, but I did see the movie, and Jamie Foxx, who acted the guy, was pretty much arrested because he looked like, just because how he looked, he was arrested. And to me, that's nothing new, to be in a store and to be followed, because the assumption is that Black people is this, Black people is that, so you have to be always be walking on like eggshells when you go into a store. So it to me, I don't think racism and what's going on in America will ever change. We could march till the end of time, because I don't see change when it comes to love for Black people in America. I don't know what happened, but they just see us as different. They don't try to engage, and the assumption is always this person is bad because of their skin color. And it's a shame to see what's going on. I watched the movie, but to me, it wasn't no surprise. It's happening today. We have more Black people in prison than any other country, typically. So, and most of them are in there because of that same issue. Misrepresentation, take the plea, you'll get out, they say you're guilty, and the cycle just keep going around. So I don't know what we're going to do to fix it, but it's going to take, in my opinion, a miracle. Thank you.
Yeah, it definitely, we should be much further than we are in 2021. it's hard to see sometimes if there will be change when it feels like we take a step forward and 2 steps back a lot of the times. Just for the sake of time, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next question. So I'm going to give the floor over here to Hillary, sorry. I'm going to give the floor over to Hillary here for question 2.
Okay, so consider the incident in Just Mercy where Stevenson's car was searched illegally by the police. Do you think the officers acted appropriately? Stevenson wished he had been more assertive with the police while they were illegally searching his car. Do you think that would have been effective? How would you recommend someone respond in a similar situation? I think personally for me with this part that with the assertiveness, I think it may or may not have made a difference. It just depends. I think it may have just agitated them further because I think he was coming from the it was the execution, I think, right, Allie? And they mentioned that a little bit, and he had the papers scattered everywhere, and maybe it may or may not have made a difference.
Yeah, he was coming home from a long day from work and just listening to the radio.
Yep, just trying to kind of relax, and it came out of nowhere.
How scary would it be if you had 2 police pull you over and had guns pointed at you?
I'd say it would be very scary.
Would you sass back?
No, I definitely would not.
No. And he was well aware of how Black folks were treated. So he just had to lay low. And, you know, he was hoping that the roommate would come out or somebody would say something, and they just kept talking about the robber, and then they wondered if he was the robber. And it's pretty sad. I just think about the fact that, you know, I look at people and how many people really tell the truth. I was the wife of an attorney, and he's deceased, and my brother's an attorney. I know a little bit about law. In fact, sometimes I get on the phone and tell people what to do. My husband would say, "Well, you're not the attorney." And I said, "Yeah, but I can figure enough, and you really don't want to talk to him." So, but it's sad when you have to think about where truth is. And when you're looking at our judicial system and what is going on, you know, the sad thing, we started seeing more people sent to the to the electric chair here recently because it was redone. And, you know, that was made ex-President Trump happy. And I don't know. In everything that was going on, some of my family had political differences. And when bottom line, I said, I don't worship politics, I worship God. He is number one. And that is who I follow allegiance to. It is not a human being, because as much as we try to be perfect, we cannot be. You know, we spend our life working on that. But as Vicki said earlier, we all have things in our life that we regret. And, you know, a sin is a sin is a sin, no matter how bad or how little. So that's all.
Yes, and I agree with you, Ms. Trina, on that. That's definitely the case.
I just wanted to say that I don't, if you were to be more assertive, like to the police officer, I just think that would have just escalated the situation due to him being, and you know, his color. However, if he would have been like white, the officer would not have acted in that way at all, like has searched the car illegally because of the just like the, you know, the systemic racism here in our country.
I knew
But
the
how
Brant
do you,
Commission. Oh, I'm sorry.
that's okay.
Sure.
How do you said that if they were white, the officers would not have searched the car illegally, but how do you know that for a fact? I'm saying like,
Oh yeah, nope, yep, no, I think that, yep, I think that's pretty much a fact. I mean, I am white, and you know, my parents are EMS providers. They work.
I think the part that stuck out to me in that section 2 was that whenever he was putting in a complaint, that many had urged him to say that, you know, he was a lawyer essentially, and he was working on civil rights cases. And the part where he was like, you shouldn't have to use credentials in order to, no one should have to do this, have to prove who they are and their credentials in order to prove that something was illegally done to them. And I mean, that's true. Not everyone is given that.
May I speak real quick?
Sarah, if you want to go. Oh, sorry, Ian, if you want to go.
I just want to respond to that question of how do you know that would happen if he was white? It's the fact that we've seen this happen on multiple occasions. We've seen it happen with Dylan Roof when he shot up an all black church and then he took him to Burger King or whatever afterwards. We see with Philando Castile where he was just parked in his car. Well, he was just in his car and he's reaching for his registration or gun license or whatever, and they shot him right there while he was reaching for it. We have seen this happen to many black folk on many occasions. So you don't get to say, how do you know this would happen if he was white? I'm just that's all I have to say. I'm sorry.
yeah, no, I agree with you. I was just saying in any instance, I'm sure that yes, there has been numerous incidents like that, but I'm sure that there also has been incidences where white people have had their car searched illegally as well. So I'm just saying, like, in that specific time, you don't know until it actually happens.
That possibly might be true, but if it ever led to a trial, that would have been thrown out of, you know, the racism would have leaked it, or the prejudicial, if it was a white person who was on trial, it probably would have been tossed out as evidence. It wouldn't have been evidence if they were you know, wrongly searched, illegally searched. So I think also in the book, what hit me, I mean, every single sentence hit me in the book, but I was reminded that if you're a person of color, that you have zero say, like no one, you don't get to speak for yourself. No one gets to speak for you. You are a non-entity. It just, I don't know. There aren't even words to express how.
May I?
Yeah.
If you ask me, should he have been more assertive or would I have been more, this has never happened to me. There's no way that they would have stopped in the first place a little old white lady. Now, maybe if I sat outside my apartment really long and somebody started to worry for some reason, they would check to see if I were okay. But it doesn't happen. Okay, we don't have to worry about that stuff. This is, to me, that whole scene was horrific. And he has such a wonderful way of writing to put us right there with him in the car or in the execution chamber. I'm really impressed with his writing style. But anyway, I don't have to worry about that stuff. I don't have to worry about being followed in a store. These are experiences beyond my comprehension and absolutely horrific.
Thanks, Mary. I think Sarah's gonna hop on now to respond.
Hi, yeah, my internet's cutting out, so if I stop, then just move on. But the scene in the car really hit me in particular because I've American, and I know that he has gone through so many of these things. I personally there's one evening I was at a friend's house in West Virginia, and I called him and said, come over and join us and pick me up and whatever. And he said to me, "You want me to drive into West Virginia after dark?" And I said, "Well, yeah, could you just come over and pick me up?" And he got pulled over. He got pulled over in Ridgely. And, he has long dreadlocks, and he was a hip hop artist locally, and he's also an architect. And so he has like his professional clothes hanging in the back. And the police officer looked through the back, not illegal search, but looked through the back. His neatly pressed shirts hanging in the back of the car. And but he gave him a ticket. And I mean, I'm terrified of this sort of thing happening to him all the time. Like it's terrifying.
I think we have enough time for one.
I jump in on this?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. My name's Aaron. I have actually been in this situation myself. I was arrested once, and the cops they're trained in like a 6-month program where they're going to do everything they can to get what they want in that situation. Like they're trained just to start by asking you weird questions to get you out of the right mindset. I think it would be in your worst interest possible to refuse a search of the car. Anything you say to these guys, their answer is, "Well, why don't you want to do this for me? Because you're actually doing something illegal?" It is a situation where you're railroaded in to whatever they want to put on you. I mean, I don't think he would have been in a better situation if he would have been assertive and tried not to have his car searched. I think regardless of who it was, even if they weren't acting suspicious, if a police officer, just the way that they're trained, if they're called into a situation, they're going to handle it in almost the worst possible way for the citizen. They're going to try to, one, either save their own lives because they're in the mentality that everybody's out to get them, or they're just out to try and get numbers on the board for their own quotas. So I don't know. I don't think any benefit would have came from trying to disagree with any police officer.
I think to agree with Aaron, I was thinking about that earlier, how, Black people are raised to, you have to do this, you have to do that, just so, you don't get shot, you don't get hurt, you don't have to go to jail. God, I wish I remember. There was one movie where it was a Black kid. They actually shot the Black kid, and he was with his friends, and it was raining. They were stuck at the police station, and the mother was just crying, wanted to know what was going on, and the white guy or the white police officer just didn't want to help, and wouldn't give any information. What was her son? Her son was only like 15, 16 years old. He was, preparing for Harvard and all kinds of stuff. And then, well, just wait till my husband gets here, and come to find out her husband is this top lawyer and whatever not. And he walks in and they're like, "Oh my God, how are we supposed to tell him that one of our officers shot him just because he's Black?" And, in an instance of being pulled over, you can sit there and say, you know, you can either fight it and say, I have the rights to, I don't have to tell you what's in my car, or say, I have nothing to hide, officer, you know, feel free to check my car. But even so, even if you have your hands on the wheel or wherever it is that you want them, they want you to have it, what are you supposed to do? Because they're still going to go, well, I'm going to find a reason to do whatever it is that I want to do to make you look like the bad person. And then social media, oh, don't let me start on social media, but social media goes and instigates the worst of the worst for both sides. And it's just not fair. There's no fine line, there's no boundary, there's nothing. There's nothing to say this is right, this is wrong, or hey, let's try this. Or even when there's two cops and one knows that the other cop is in the wrong, but because, you know, we all have, you know, we have a nurse code, we have a doctor code, we have a cop code, you know, nobody wants to break that, because then guess what? You're the outcast, you know. So what, it's sad that we even have to live in a society that, well, I just want to be accepted. No, stand up for what's right. That's what's wrong with society, is nobody wants to stand up for what's right. They just want to stand up for what's going to make money. And that's really what it comes down to. Even if it's racism or politics, or if it's healthcare or whatever it may be, that's really what it comes down to.
A piece of movie that you like from your story that you just gave, a great example for a movie would be The Hate U Give, because they show in the movie where the African American people have to put their hands on the dash and keep their hands there because they are so scared of what the officers are going to do to them. And it just shows, like, it's just so powerful. All of this is just so powerful, and for us to understand.
Even like Ian said, it's happening in real life. We don't have to watch movies. It's
happening, oh yeah, for sure happening in real life.
Just, it's, I mean, and I agree with Aaron too, that police officers only get 6 months of training. You know, they don't get much training. They don't know what they're doing, but it's not an excuse to kill someone. I mean, that person's not even getting a trial, not even getting the possibility of a chance not against capital punishment. I don't know how to say it correctly, but I mean, I agree that we shouldn't have capital punishment, but it's not even getting to that point. They're being murdered immediately, even at the, you know, before trial, before anything. Anyway.
We're happening in front of us every day, but we don't get to see what exactly took place in certain instances. So that's why sometimes watching a movie that pertains to certain circumstances gives a lot of insight on a situation.
True. Yeah, that's true.
We are going to go ahead and move on to the next question. This discussion is great. That's why we have, you know, several discussions planned for the different chapters of this book, but we do want to cover most of the sections. So Ashley, I think Ashley's next to read off our next question.
Ashley, are you muted? Could you unmute?
I'll go ahead and read the next question. Ashley, if you're still able to, you can always hop in after I read the next one. In your opinion, Who is most to blame for Walter's conviction? Who were some of Walter McMillan's most important allies, and how did race and poverty play a role in the jury's ultimate decision? How did diversity in a jury affect its deliberations?
I can provide a little bit of background for those who may not have read the book. But Walter was convicted in a murder of a young woman, and basically was convicted after I believe he was the boyfriend of like his ex fling type thing, basically said that he had seen Walter murder this woman, despite the fact that Walter had several witnesses that could put him at his house at the time of the murder, and that his car was not even functioning at that time. But there were multiple witnesses that, I guess fake witnesses essentially, who came forward and said that they saw his truck by the murder, but it all boiled down to one person had lied and said that Walter was there. And then he was also taken in. Basically, he was questioned by police and forced to come up with this story because he was also mentally ill. And Walter ended up being convicted based on that man's basically story alone.
I think we're all to blame for his conviction. I am to blame for his conviction. Our culture really has a justice system for the wealthy, and there is really no justice system in place for people like Walter, and that has to change. I don't know how to do it, but I feel responsible for myself when I read that stuff.
I'll jump on to say that though I don't personally feel responsible, that is probably my white privilege that is shining through that I was unaware that I had. I think the justice system is 100% to blame. They failed him completely. There are not enough proper protocols in place to protect people of color. I honestly, my eyes have been opened through this. I did not realize that this was still happening. I mean, I knew a little bit with the news, but this book was enlightening to me to see how much actually still goes on in today's society and how truly sad it is. But yeah, I think our justice system needs a complete makeover.
I think definitely the justice system 100% is responsible for his conviction. And as far as allies go, I'd say one of the biggest allies that he had was his family, kind of being able to vouch for him. And even the fact that Bryan Stevenson acknowledged that and took the time to go hear their story and that hear out that they knew he did not do this crime.
Well, do you remember there was the other gentleman that stopped by the church gathering to purchase the food on that day, and they convinced him to lie and say it was a different day. They were twisting the one guy to change his stories because they just wanted him to feed into what they were desiring. And this is why it is so sad that humans are more than willing to lie about things.
Right.
It is very sad.
And I think also the fact that some of these stories, like when the crime was committed and when they were convicted, took place back in the 80s and 90s, and the fact that it's still happening today in 2021 is heartbreaking, knowing that we haven't made any more progress than we did back then.
It truly is.
Can I say about progress? I think something the reason that there is no progress from from then till now is because we are not learning this until now. If like I am like a if I were to learn this in high school or in middle school instead of learning like the powerhouse of the cells, like mitochondria, like can I learn like this happens to like this would be good to teach people like high schoolers because it's real life. Like this is sad and they need to know it exists, because if we don't teach them, then we're just living in like how we're living now, there's not going to get better. So I think the change needs to be teaching this to children, well, not children, but young adults, and, opening everyone's minds.
I'm curious as to, what curriculum goes on in different schools, because I've attended, 4 different high schools, and then of course, there's middle school, and each one of those, we were taught race. I mean, not taught to be racist, but we were taught about racism. And there's, children of every color within that. And it's, it's a little heartbreaking knowing that, some of you are barely seeing this and it's being hidden from you. But for some of us who, I guess maybe it's because we're in low poverty schools that this does happen to us. But, going even before that, the son's best friend, he saw everything that happened, but he knew the jeopardy that it would put his family in. So at first he was willing to testify, but then he was afraid of what might happen if he did testify. And that's what's sad, why should he have been scared for his mother, to testify for his best friend's dad, knowing that his best friend probably would have done it for him because he saw the whole thing that happened, I think that's what's heartbreaking.
Well, you also, in the school books, you have to look who wrote the history. What did they include? When one thing that was very enlightening, civil rights in the 60s, really civil rights helped women very much so, along with the blacks, because it gave us a voice. And, so women are more respected, but if you read Caste, it is, it's a really good book. It tells a lot. I'm not going to say, but I would encourage all of you to read it.
No, that's great. The textbooks are great and everything and whatnot, but I mean, like, even with our teachers, we saw this with teachers, we saw this with other kids, because of course, as children, it starts with our parents. We see how our parents react to other people, so then we start reacting to other people in the same way and think that that's okay. So that's what I meant by that comment, not by just because of the textbooks we're being taught that way. We're being taught by instructors, we're being taught by our parents, and it's not being shown. So I'm sorry if I didn't communicate that correctly.
Well, it's just, how do people in a family talk about other people? Do they call them by the very negative nicknames, or very derogatory toward people? I mean, if you're growing up and that's what you're hearing in your house, you're going to have a bias, which is sad. And it's like fear can make you just not do anything. And that is why sometimes you just have to step out and face your demons. I mean, face what you're afraid of, because when you walk through it, you're going to be stronger for it.
Thanks, Trina and Marissa. I think I saw a person named HR raise their finger first, and then we have Sierra and Kendall and then Jody, and then we'll have to move on to the next question because we are only here till 8:30.
Yeah, that was me. Thank you.
Yes.
I think everybody is making a whole lot of really good points, and I think what we gather from this is that this is a really complex issue. When you're trying to figure out who's responsible and therefore how can it be addressed. I mean, obviously the idea is that, how do we solve this? How do we make progress? How do we move from where we are to where we'd like to be? And I think it's just one of the things that I haven't heard that I think is also an issue is basically our value system in our country now is everything is about winning. And if you're not winning, you're losing. And that's how the district attorneys feel when they're prosecuting these cases. They don't mind if they have witnesses who lie, because to them, it's the justice system is not about justice, it's about winning. Because if you win cases, then you're promoted, you're lauded by your peers and your co-workers. And so it's like there's almost a built-in corruption that in the entire system, that if you don't actively, mentally sort of gird your loins against, so to speak, you're going to, you're going to buy into it, and you end up with all these miscarriages of justice, which are just heinous. Not happiness, heinous. Okay, sorry, I was correcting the subtitle.
I think
I don't think they got it.
It's not always correct.
Okay.
I think Sierra, I saw your hand. It was up and then down, and then Kendall, and then Jody. Sorry, guys. There's a lot going on. Lots of great conversations. Sierra, you're good. Okay. Then Kendall.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to touch base on what Marissa was talking about a little while ago about, being taught at a young age and how realistic it still is to this day. I come from a biracial family. My mother was 100% Italian. My father's Black. I, of course, don't have a lot of dark features. I have dark eyes. I do have darker skin, but my father was a light-skinned man. My children are blonde hair and blue eyes. So growing up, teaching them, to prove that it still happens a lot this day. My daughter will be graduating from Frankfurt High School here in Short Gap, West Virginia this year. And even my children, my son and my daughter, as a young children in school today, I had to even teach my own children going through school before they would allow friends to come over or my daughter to date certain people. They, in this generation, have still learned that they have to ask, is your family racist? Do your family have any kind of racial, biased opinions about people of certain color? Because my grandfather's Black, in fear that if their grandfather comes over, there may be certain comments made or certain things that, somebody may feel uncomfortable with. So it is still very, very real, even today.
Absolutely, yeah. I think Jody is next.
Yeah, I'd like to say that HR had a really good point there about the justice system and the importance of winning rather than trying to get the best outcome, the truth.
Right.
I definitely agree with her on that. But I do think that things are changing. And I think one of the outcomes of the video age are the Zoom meetings themselves and getting this dialogue. And we're talking with each other. We're going to be talking with our families. We're recommending these fabulous books. And it's the video itself that has brought a lot of these criminal activities done by government sanctioned murder because they've been captured on videotape. And so it's, even though the men have not been prosecuted, I'm talking about the policemen that have been guilty of these murders, they get off scot-free. But a lot of us can't stand that anymore. We're outraged. And that's why I say that I felt responsible for that man's death. I don't think I was outraged enough, but I am now. And we have to be very politically active. And one of the things that a friend of mine who is in the NAACP said, that when you're out and you see someone stopping an African American on the road, get your camera out. You know, it's difficult for the person in that car to say anything. They just have to keep their hands up and be quiet. But you are allowed to videotape that transaction that's going on. And she actually tried it when she saw this altercation on the highway. And as soon as she started her camera going, there was a complete change in the way the police officers began talking to the driver of the car. And it was simply because they knew they were being filmed. And even though that's ridiculous, they shouldn't have to be doing this, do it. You know, please stand up for anybody you see that is a part of this horrible abuse.
All right, I know we have 2 more hands raised, but we do need to move on to our last question. We only have 15 more minutes left in our discussion. I'm going to move, we had a final question as well, move that to the chat just to make sure we have plenty of time for this kind of last question for chapter 4. And I think
I'm gonna give myself the floor.
Go, Allie.
All right, let me copy it and put it in chat here, and I'll just read it. Okay. At this point in Just Mercy, Stevenson's Legal Defense Center is seriously underfunded while also highly in demand. Not many people would have the stamina to continue facing the major challenges he is facing. What impact does Richardson's execution have on him, and how would you feel in this position? I know I personally am someone who feels easily overwhelmed, so I don't know how Bryan Stevenson did it. I really don't. And the fact that he did not feel, after Richardson's execution, overwhelmed with just too many emotions. Instead, he was kind of rejuvenated by it to get back out there and keep doing it. I don't think I would have been strong enough to do that. So I think that is just really inspiring. Obviously, it's not great that I had to take something really awful to happen, but that was kind of my reading of it.
Yeah.
Trina, I think I see your hand. Go ahead. You are muted. You'll need to unmute yourself. Here we go.
Okay. As a nurse, I can only relate this to my field. You have to have passion. And one thing that I have a lot of passion in nursing about is wellness. And as I started my career, when I graduated from nursing school, I was almost a size 16, and you have to practice what you preach. And I didn't look like a healthy nurse. I never smoked, I don't drink, but I needed to choose my food wisely. I needed to exercise. And so I did that because that's what I have to do. And as I was in code situations and taking care of people that I could see were making unwise choices, you know, I've tried to teach. And it is so important during COVID, mask, wash your hands, and stay away. And when you get your shot, you all, a lot of you, I say the age group, you haven't had it. Do not take any medication before you get that shot because it decreases the antibodies. Do not take anything 5 hours after you get the shot. You probably may have some, when the antibodies go in your body, the first shot fights the second shot, and you may have some reaction. But by all means, get the shot. That is what that's what we have to fight. And with these mutations, who knows what's going to happen? End of talk.
I think a lot of times I can only speak to my own life. Like a lot of things happen for a reason. Like I've learned from, missteps or different things that have happened in my life. I think Bryan learned quickly, personally, how dehumanizing it is when he was illegally stopped and searched, so I think that might have helped a little bit in motivating him, and obviously his grandmother, but I think, I think it's good that he was in his 20s, like, when he first started out, because maybe he was idealistic in the very beginning. Like he thought, maybe the idealism carried him, a little bit. Not carried him isn't the right word, but helped a little bit in thinking that ultimately he could make a strong impact, and he did, obviously. But anyway, I'll shut up.
I'll just jump in for a second. I think he was called. I mean, there's just no other way to put it. I think he was called to this work. When I was younger, I was a housing counselor in Baltimore, and, was just out of college and thought I could be really helpful. And, I worked with families, and, I watched them go through evictions. I helped them grab things off the street before people took their stuff away. It was traumatizing for them. It was traumatizing for me. I can't imagine how Stevenson could go through experiences like having his clients be put to death and get up the next day and feel like he had, the expertise to do it again. I mean, when you work in these situations, you often question, what could I have done? How could I have made it better? I'm not good enough. And he doesn't seem to have that. I mean, kind of did in the very beginning when he's going to speak to, I guess it's Williams. I'm sorry, I got their names confused. But when he goes to speak to the gentleman and says, you're not going to be executed in this year. And, he was so worried about how underprepared he was and how he wasn't going to be giving this client any good expertise. And he actually gave the client everything that he wanted. But long story short, I just think he was called to the work. And the fact that he used his Harvard law degree to sleep on somebody's sofa for almost 2 years before he could afford an apartment. When you think of all the people that are using their Harvard law degrees to go work on Wall Street and, rip us all off, I think he was called to it, and it's almost holy what he does.
All right, well, we only have a few minutes left. We could probably fit in one more response to that, or I can go ahead and read the parting thought. We had a question that was submitted, but I think it's more of a food for thought question. I don't think that there is an answer that we can give to the question. So I can either move on with that, we can leave on that note, or if someone else has something to add. I'll go ahead and
I'd like to say something.
Yep, go right ahead.
Just speaking to this, the stamina of the attorney. As a nurse myself, it's as an African American or Caribbean American nurse, it's you go to school and you're taught that you're a patient's advocate, and that I have a natural love for caring for people. I like to do stuff like that. It's like that's what I like to do. So no matter what happens, no matter how negatively I'm treated in the workplace, I still give my clients that optimum care. It's the staff, your co-workers that you work with, the residents that you work with. You have older clients who have dementia, and they still see Black people they as fear. They don't want your care for them because of your skin color. You have the healthcare is like, for me as Black people, as a Black person, the healthcare field right now is like what's going on, with Black people in general, like an everyday thing. They treat you as if you're subhuman, like you are less educated, like you are, the supervisors or the Caucasian, the white co-workers treat you indifferent from the other staff members. And, it takes real grit to push on, because they will never break me when it comes to caring for my people. And I guess that's what this man did when he took the case. He pushed on and he persevered, because it's what we do. And I'll be here doing what I do. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. We've had a lot of healthcare workers here tonight, and I'm sure there's a lot of resilience there. So thank you for being here, and thank you for all that you're doing. So I'm going to go ahead and just pose this last question. CBS Sunday Morning did a story last week on a minority cemetery in Washington, D.C. The cemetery was large and had several prominent and influential Black people buried there. The cemetery was moved to make way for the metro. The bodies were moved to another location and reburied. However, the headstones were sold, and a buyer bought them to use to secure the riverbank at his home along the Potomac River. The Black gentleman interviewed about the story stated that this type of disregard for the minority people buried in the cemetery and sale of their headstones was thought of as casual. I feel like Walter and the other falsely accused and harshly sentenced Black men on death row were thought of as casual. To pin the murder on Walter just to have an answer to justify the public is a casual way of thinking of his life. When will society start considering minority lives as more than a casual existence? So I think we've covered a lot of that tonight, and that we have a long way to go. But that is pretty much our time. That was a very long thought, but we will be back in 2 weeks to discuss even more. If anyone would like to have any parting words. Okay, then, if that is all, then thank you all for being here. Thank you for joining us on this very important discussion. Thank you for sharing all such personal stories as well and having these hard discussions. So yeah, we'll hopefully have the video up for anyone if you want to share it, and we will see you at the next one. Thank you for coming.
Thanks, guys.